I grew up in a fairly stable home, but definitely had my own, various incidences of trauma that have definitely gone through my adult life. Was also in a school shooting, checked myself into a mental health facility, and actually learned so much from that experience. I have started my nonprofit really getting trauma responsive skills and tools into our communities at a large scale as much as possible. So I guess I say all that because doing the work for me has been truly life changing and gotten me to a totally different sort of level of understanding around life and humanity.
Yeah, how did the school shooting affect your life?
Yeah, well, so funny, I guess not funny, but funny story. My husband is a police officer. And so we've always debated before the school shooting, like who has the safer job, him as a police officer on the road or me as an educator in the school system. And I think that, it was definitely a very big aha moment for me because I realized I actually think my job is less safe than my husband's job as a police officer, which I mean, on a large scale for our whole country, I don't think anybody should be okay with that. Our kids should not be in a position where they are less safe than our police officers, who are putting themselves, their lives on the line every single day. And it really, it changed my understanding of our mental health systems in our country and how little access we actually have, how much of a privilege it is to gain resources like this. And it really helped me to understand humanity and truly that we are all struggling. We all have trauma. We all have brains. I don't think anybody gets to leave this planet without enduring trauma. And I always tell people, like, being human is really uncomfortable. Like, I don't know a single human who's like, this is great. This is amazing. No flaws. It's perfectly, like, easy to be human. And I think we just need to be out there more talking about how uncomfortable the human experience really can be, and that none of us are in isolation in that discomfort, and none of us should feel shame in that discomfort.
What inspired you to create Undo Mindset?
Um, you know, I had um, I had two aha moments when I was in the mental health facility. I've worked at 9 different schools in my career, which has given me a really amazing balcony view of what we are doing in education and what we're not doing in education, what we're doing effectively versus what we're not doing effectively, what we're doing between communities to communities. It was really educational. But I really, sat there a lot of times in inpatient, outpatient in these classes thinking, gosh, my students. I mean, I've had students who, are first graders and have had their houses shot up or parents murdered or, really tragic things for such young people, and knowing that that will forever change the trajectory of their lives. And if we could get the skills to these kids prior to some of these really insane and intense trauma experiences so that they can really file that trauma away correctly, I know that their trajectory will be better off than if we didn't. And so I think my love for the children that I've always taught and seeing their struggles I've always felt very stifled, and that, like, I love these kids. I know they deserve better, but I don't know how to help them get to that space. I think this work has finally given me that ability to help in the ways that I know will systematically help. But the other aha moment is that I had, like, a homeless guy who was sitting there next to me, and he was like, I have no freaking clue how I'm going to spend or find several $1,000s to cover this bill. I just know I needed to be here to save my life. And it was in that moment that I was like, oh my gosh. And I reflected back on my own experiences of being a young adult. And, like, $50 copay for a therapist appointment once a month was too much for me to actually financially handle. I don't think anybody should ever be in a space of, like, should I exist tomorrow or should I not?
Huh.
Can I afford to exist tomorrow or can I not? A financial component and equitability and accessibility, none of those things should ever come into play when we are talking about, like, existing on the planet for another day. So yeah, I had those aha moments, and it really just opened up my eyes truly to how much mental health is at the core of all of our human struggles. My husband is a police officer. I've seen it firsthand from him. It doesn't matter really if it's our suicide rate, our divorce rate, our obesity rate, our teen suicide rate, our teen bullying rate, our hoarding, I mean, literally, you could take any challenge a singular human has experienced in their lives, and I could absolutely equate it back to mental health. So to me, it seems like a no-brainer. Like, if mental health is the crux of all of humanity, why don't we just get it out there in mass quantities as much as humanly possible so that we can all, and I think it's very liberating to feel in control of your thoughts, feel in control of your emotions, feel in control of your decisions, and not let trauma or past experiences be what is controlling you. It's very liberating. I think every human deserves the opportunity to try to experience that.
Yeah, what are some of your programs?
Yeah, so we are developing or have developed a curriculum. It's all computer based. And we really just teach people, we have 35 different lessons, and we teach people just all about the brain. How does the brain function? When all of our thoughts, I'll give you a quick brain lesson.
Yeah.
This is kind of like the stem of everything we teach. But I always say it in my 8-year-old's verbiage, but she always talks about how when your thoughts enter your brain, they enter in the caveman part of your brain. A lot of us know the lizard brain. That's where, you go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn. That's a survival thing that we need. If I touch the hot stove, that's where I need to be reactive and not touch that hot stove. It will help me stay alive. However, it's not where we function the best. We actually have to really get through into that frontal lobe. If our thoughts get stuck in that middle part of our brain, that's where we can be very emotional. That's where we tend to project. That's where we tend to blame. We have a really hard time taking accountability. For me, I become a very big crier if I get stuck in that part of my brain. It's where we tend to be very emotional again, and not necessarily acting or vocalizing in a space of logic. I always say, a lot of guys out there are like, oh, emotions are bad, logic is good. And I'm always like, you actually scientifically have to get through that emotional part of our brains to get to that frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe, I always have to share, it develops until you're at least 25. Although if you have a diverse brain, they say that you can tack on at least another decade. I'm almost 40, and I do feel like about 35, and also checking myself into a mental health facility, then I was finally like, okay, I'm comfortable in my own human. Like, I'm okay with doing this now. And so I think it's, us telling people they're adults at 18, I think is like the wildest thing we've done as a society, because your brain is not, that logical part of your brain does not develop until you are at least 25. But our goal is really, in all of our skills and tools, everything that we teach is to really help people understand how that brain works, and then how to slow down. What are some skills and tools we can do to process things so we're not reacting in that fight flight in a very triggered or very impulsive type way. We want to slow down that brain and continue to move and make sure that we're making those decisions in the frontal lobe. I always use my husband as an example of this. We can train our brain to do it very quickly as well. So he's a police officer, and he and I have very different brains. I can get to that frontal lobe, but I am still very emotional. I'm a highly sensitive human, and I just feel my emotions deeply. So it takes me a little bit longer. He has trained his brain to immediately get to that frontal lobe. So we could show up to a house, burning fire, kittens, grandmas, all the things in there. And my husband will be as cool as a cucumber. I mean, he is not dysregulated. He is like, okay, I know, if my heart starts beating, I'm not going to make the best decisions. If my hands start getting clammy, that tells me I'm getting stuck in that fight, flight, freeze. And so he's really able to utilize different coping skills to really get his thoughts to that frontal lobe where he's calm. He's not, I always say, when you're in fight, flight, you kind of see tunnel vision almost, if you've gotten so angry that you don't even remember the details around you, you just did something angry. I think that's how we typically function in that fight, flight, freeze, where we're not taking in all the information, right? So it's not safe actually to continue to be in heightened experiences in that space. While it is for our initial survival, in like a house on fire, that is not going to help us survive, right? We got to be here in that frontal lobe and actually have like a solid game plan and figure out how to navigate that challenge. And so that's what our program does, is it really helps people identify their emotions, identify how to process things in a way that's going to get you that frontal lobe faster and more habitually.
What is it like getting this information out to younger people who can be more open with their emotions than, when we were kids?
Okay, we have a junior board. There are middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college age kiddos. And I always say they're my actual bosses. I adore them. I love them. I think I want more of them. So if you're listening and you want to join our junior board, please reach out to me, Erin at undomindset.org. I always say to them, I grew up with AIM. I didn't grow up in this age of overexposure without adults behind us really helping us process that overexposure. These kids, this next gen, they have a serious mental health crisis happening. And there's a book called The Anxious Generation that I suggest to anybody who wants to understand this teen, young adult mental health crisis. It has relevant current data and the technological world view of what's going on. But I think that they are very intelligent because they see microbursts of information at like high speeds their entire life, right? Like their whole lives have been reels of information. And just, I see it even with my own kids where I'm like, how do you know so much? You're only 13. But same thing, like they're very emotionally intelligent. They're very empathetic. They see things they can't unsee, like a kid in the Ukraine maybe exploding, and that's causing a lot of mental health challenges. But they're also seeing kids in Ukraine exploding and thinking, oh my gosh, that is not the world I want to live in. That is really ugly, and we need to do better. And they're like social justice advocates like I've never seen. But also when it comes to the mental health stuff, they are very transparent, raw, and real. I mean, when I've taught this in person, kids will show up and be like, I'm bipolar. Yeah, when I was in inpatient, like I'm a millennial. My generation, the generations before us, like we all would just like hush hush about these things. Yeah. And I think that they're on the right track because I do think the more we can destigmatize these human experiences, the less shame we have and the healthier we are as a society, not just mentally, but physically, because when we are not mentally healthy, we are not physically healthy. So yeah, I mean, the junior board and the next gen, they are very transparent about all things mental health, and they I think are very eager to really find solutions. I mean, every time I meet with a junior board member and I tell them what we're doing, they're like, oh, finally somebody, like an adult in this world's listening to us. I think a lot of adults are like, oh, you're resilient, we all had tough stuff, you'll get over it. But this mental health crisis and the technological association with it is like something we have never seen in humanity before.
How has your mission helped your own healing process?
Oh my gosh. Well, as a former teacher, my goal was always to get my students to a place where they could teach others. That's when on a scale of knowledge, that's when you've really reached that top and you are proficient in that subject matter. I talk about mental health day in and day out. And I have a lot of people, because of my position in this role, that reach out to me in the personal level, and wanting help. And so I literally feel like I spend 24/7 just entrenched in this work. And it makes things very habitual for me. So I think honestly, starting this organization has been one of the best things for my mental health, not only because it's helped me to achieve purpose, the top of Maslow's hierarchy, but it's also helped me to really, when I was learning some of these things, there was like 6 months, for example, where I would have to sit here and just remind myself on repeat, like, is that noise or is that beneficial? Is that noise or is that beneficial? Are you getting stuck in whatever that thing is, but it's not really going to help you with life? Or is it going to help you like get one step in front of the other? And I had to like repeat it on constantly in my brain, every decision, conversation. And now that I'm so entrenched in this work, like that just becomes habit. I don't have to think about like, is this noise? I just immediately am like, nope, noise, move forward. And so like all of our skills, I feel like again, because I do this 24/7, it's become very much just how I am. And then my husband's also the mental health guy at the police department. So we live it and breathe it. And our poor children have to listen to us all the time as well.
Yeah, what have you learned from your husband?
I've learned so much. He is the mental health guy. So like anytime they have somebody who is feeling suicidal, or somebody who's going through a mental health crisis in general, they have psychosis, they are schizophrenic, they are dysregulated in some way. He's usually the guy that they call to show up. And he has taught me a lot in those very first moments that I have been able to take into the classroom with me. But again, if you think about like that tunnel vision, he makes sure that whoever he's working with, he is the focus of that tunnel vision, not whatever else was under their, on their radar before. But he will sit there and the first thing he will say is like, look at me. And if they don't look in his eyes, that's okay. But generally in his general direction so that he knows they're not paying attention to like the details of something else. And he's really trying to get them cognitively back online and focused on their goals together. So a lot of times he'll say like, let's do some breathing. Actually, I shouldn't say a lot of times, 100% of the time, he will start with, let's do some breathing exercises. And scientifically, if you really breathe a deep, full, fill up your lungs completely, you have a gland that's right underneath your rib cage that when you fill up your lungs, it presses on that gland, which releases all those good chemicals. But the breathing itself helps to also slow down your heart rate, which helps you slow down anxious thoughts, which really helps your central nervous system get cognitively back online, gets your brain back into, I guess your nervous system can't get cognitively back online, get your nervous system grounded and get your brain cognitively back online to be able to really like say, okay, what's the issue here and how can we solve it together? And then also making sure that people always know he's in it with them. That he's not here, he's very progressive. He's not the bad guy. He's not here to yell at you or shame you or judge you. He has also checked himself into a mental health facility as well. He takes people there like 10, 20 times a week. So it's really informative that he's been there as well to be able to empathize and understand. Like sitting in a parking lot of a mental health facility is really overwhelming. I don't think anybody is like, this is easy. Let me go walk into that building and commit myself, But he has really been able to empathize with people and help them understand that like it's not scary, but it is an essential. And also I think the other thing too is both in my work and his work, we've seen so much of humanity, but I see him through and through not judging. He comes with a non-judgmental ear anytime he approaches a situation. He's like, I don't care if you are going through a psychosis event and you've peed your pants and you've punched your mom and, like all of these worsts of humanity. I'm here to help you so that we can fix these things and move forward. And I think that a lot of times when we are in our most human moments, that's the best thing any of us can do is like, I'm here to help and listen, I'm here to just be a non-judgmental person who gets that you're just having a human moment like the rest of us.
I know for me, I live with bipolar disorder too, and talking with people with lived experience does so much for my own mental health,
Mm-hmm.
other than, researchers and stuff like that, which they do important work, but it's always someone that I could relate to, like talking to you. I'm like, hey, that happened to me. So
Mm-hmm.
stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. How important is it for people to talk to other people with lived experiences?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. I also just want to say I also am bipolar as well. I always say I have very well managed bipolar and ADHD. I can see the signs and symptoms of when I'm going to have an ADHD or bipolar type moment. And I'm able to really navigate them better because I have refiled the filing cabinet, right?
Yeah.
Um, okay, so going back to your question, can you repeat your question? How has it, oh, group. I know what I want to say. Okay, so
Okay.
when I was inpatient, it was, so I did 4 days inpatient. And that's really like just kind of getting you, I almost think of that as like ER visits. But then after that, once you go outpatient, when they feel like they have you stabilized and you're ready to like really join groups, you do a lot of group work. I mean, the first couple of weeks, I think I was there from like 9 a.m. until 2 p.m., just group work. And that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people. I have since talked to several people who, like, I have told, Denver Springs is a great resource. You should go. And like day one of group work, they're like, I'm out. I can't do it. I'm not like putting my trauma out there for the world. And I always say, studies will show you time and time again, the best thing you can actually do is get it out in a group setting. Similar to you and I, right? Like you just said you're bipolar, and I was like, yes, I can talk about my bipolar. Like I'm in a safe space. He's not going to judge me, right? Same thing. Like if I was to say like my dad's an alcoholic and these are the things I experienced as a child growing up with him, if you've also experienced that and that's your trauma and that's my trauma, we feel in those settings like we're not alone because we're not. But also, it's good to sometimes just, I mean, I would sit there at lunch break and just talk to people and be like, oh my gosh, tell me more about your journey with your father. What has helped you? What has helped me? And you build camaraderie and you build just like a resource, right? I think about similarly, I think my very first experience of really understanding the power of destigmatizing our traumas and our challenges was when I went through fertility stuff. My kids have about 5 years in between because we had 4 miscarriages. And actually, I was told that we should not have any more kids and it could potentially kill me. So we weren't trying to have my second. But it was so lonely because people don't know what to say to you when you're going through your hardest things. And so they don't say anything at all. They're afraid they're going to make it worse. So they just back away and like disappear. And there were moments where I was just sitting there like, I don't know who I could even turn to right now in this lonely moment. But then after that journey was over, I have been very vocal about it. And I have learned like almost every woman I know has gone through something similar, maybe to a different degree here and there. But like we all struggle with this. Why are we all keeping it inside? And why are we feeling shame for it? And why did I feel so lonely? And so like, for me, I make it my mission. Anytime I talk, anybody tells me they're having fertility issues, I'm always like, I'll tell you about mine. Let's talk about it because you need a friend. It's the only way you're going to get through it. But you take that same concept and you multiply it for any other human experience. The more you can connect, the more it helps you to really understand that you are just human doing human things. There is no reason to feel shame. There's no reason to be embarrassed. It's just who you are and it's your journey.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
Great question. I do a lot. I try really hard to listen to my body and listen to my central nervous system. I feel very privileged at this point in my career to be able to do that as the boss. I get to be able to say like, oh, this afternoon I have a headache. I'm going to go take a nap or something. When I was a teacher, I could not do any of that. So I recognize this is very much privilege. But if I feel overwhelmed, I might just take an afternoon to like literally sit there and process and just sit with the discomfort of that. I also do try to make very intentional self-care moves. I personally am a firm believer that self-care shouldn't be necessarily like, oh, a day at the spa or a shopping trip. I think self-care is not procrastinating on my to-do list. I think self-care is brain dumping as often as I can. I think self-care is making sure my desk isn't cluttered. I think, self-care to me is whatever causes me stress or discomfort, I am processing that and trying to implement some system to make it more impactful and effective for me. For me, I think that it is really imperative that I am open about my mental health struggles. Like that has been the best thing for my mental health in general, because again, you meet other people and you realize like we're all screwed up. We all have trauma. We all have neurodivergent brains, and I really think that grounds me in my own humanity and helps me to really give myself grace and helps me to understand that I'm doing the best I can.
What would you say to anyone going through a tough time?
Mm. I mean, my go-to is go to therapy. Start with something, do the work in whatever way that looks like to you. I think that we have politicized emotions, and I think that it's something we can't avoid. We all have them. And if we stifle them, they just come out in ways that we don't want them to be. I know for like my own marriage, we had to both go through our own mental health work and really resolve some of our childhood traumas before we could ever come together as a couple and really work towards our common goals and our friendship, really. And so I think that if you are struggling personally, professionally, in your relationship, if you are struggling as a parent, you are struggling literally in any walk of your life. I truly think that putting one foot in front of the other in the mental health world, some capacity, whether it's EMDR or is even finding a close friend that you can open up to and be raw and real with, is a good step forward to start, processing the hard stuff and getting to a better, healthier place. Self-help books, I read and listen to so many of those, and I've learned so much. I mean, the list is endless of different resources that we really can do. I just think it's a matter of literally putting one foot in front of the other and recognizing that you're holding yourself back
Yeah.
in not doing so.
Where do you want to see your mission in the next 3 to 5 years?
Right now, that's a great question. Right now, we have about 100 volunteers. We're only about 6 months old, 7 months old now. So we're still very new, but we have about 100 volunteers and we represent
Wow.
7 different countries. Yeah, we have volunteers all over the globe. And I think in 3 to 5 years, I would love for us to be a global resource. I know that the things we are feeling here in the United States, a lot of my peers that are in other countries feel very similar challenges. I mean, again, going back to that book, The Anxious Generation, it talks about how, technology has really made a global mental health impact in every society, in every community. And so I think if we could be a resource for as many communities there's fires all over our planet. I just want to put out fires.
How can people reach out and learn more?
Yeah, you can check us out in many different ways. We are Undo Mindset on all the socials. You can go to our website, undomindset.org. Definitely check out our podcast. We're starting a whole new season in the next couple of weeks, Undo Unplugged, and that's on all of your different podcasting platforms. If you even just want to email me as the founder because you are curious, you want to get involved, whatever, you want to be a corporate sponsor or bring our curriculum to your office, whatever, you can always email me, Erin at undomindset.org.